tells the story. The first book ever written about the rank and file. Hold it, before you guys leave, I would like to ask you to help us with our cause. We are partnering the INC with Albert and Robert to go nationally with the solitary confinement initiative. We want to let the world know that solitary confinement is cruel and unusual, and we're going to fight to change the conditions of solitary confinement. But in order for us to do that, we need you guys to help us with a little bit of resources. So I'm going to pass the hat and see if you can please donate so we can continue our work. And the reason why we're showing this film, because in February during Black History Month, it's going to be on Channel 4. So you can tell your friends, that's right, it's going to be on Channel 4. You can tell your friends, your family members, panelists.
Yes.
5,
Injuries, Claudia.
National Director of Incarcerated Nation, Claudia Chesson-Williams, former Black Panther, Cisco Torres, former Black Panther. I'm also a former Black Panther. I'm in the book too. They're in the book. So take it away, 5.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to just start by picking up where BJ left off at. A lot of people don't know about the solitary movement internationally and nationally. I'm going to tell you a little story really quick. I came home after doing several years directly from solitary. I first met with Robert at NYU at an event with Juan Mendez. And I came in all bustled about my couple of little years in solitary, and I'm going to come and tell everybody about it. He was like, yeah, I did it 29 years, but look, we're going to start organizing about this. And he kind of rolled past me that this man has spent his entire time, my entire life, in a cell. So I put my little couple of years in my pocket and got to work. And what we did was created a national movement called the Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement. We sealed it with the Correctional Association because they have oversight for state facilities. And this has grown to 5 states and 3 countries. So we have solitary survivors from Canada. Robert Dunn went to England, Germany, all over the world to find survivors to create a council. And then what we've done is created mental legislation. If everybody, before they leave, can sign the CAKE petition or the listserv, there's clipboards there. Or you can sign up and sign the petition for RAP. This movement represented a point of unity. And this is something that, through letters between me and Angad Bahala and through others, Albert and Robert had formed from inside. Robert was on the other side of the country, and I was organizing here in New York and New Jersey and other states. Bonnie Kness and Ojari also helped out in New Jersey, and we had some win on juvenile laws. We now have a bill called the HALT Solitary Confinement. It stands for Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Isolated Confinement. There is a national movement with the ACLU, so we have solitary survivors in every state. Students are doing protests in every state on every 23rd of the month. This is a huge movement for human rights with an underlying cause for no cruel and unusual punishment. And I believe that it is a human, natural impulse to preserve life. And I believe that because when we started CAKE, we now have the largest New York collective project. There's over 532 organizations. There's thousands of people involved. We lobby each year. And this has all started from one man who was determined to tear down the system and not let his comrades remain in vain. So I wanted to start the conversation by framing that because there's an immense amount of work. And Robert is a very humble individual. So is Albert, very humble. And they won't speak to the amount of international work they've done. But people don't recognize solitary until they remember the Angola 3. And this is the only case that people have actually fought and getting out. You know, this is a cruel and unusual punishment in New York State that costs us more than any other state. So it's important to start the fight here. And I wanted to frame that conversation and also introduce our panelists, but I wanted to ask you, Cisco, about your experience in solitary, because you spent some time there as well, but also as a political prisoner, how that compounds the circumstances. It's different from being in a box for nothing, and it's different than the whole jail and administration is against you.
Yes, it is.
I was arrested in New York back in 1971, I believe. And that was for the murder of two policemen in New York. The case was called the New York Five. Two of my comrades from that case are currently incarcerated down at Jalil Muntakim and Herman Bell. I had a hung jury on that case along with my brother. The case was dismissed against me and him. Subsequently, Herman Bell, Jalil Muntakim, and Noah Albert Washington were convicted of the case. Noah unfortunately died in prison. He was sentenced to life in prison here in New York State. And so I was taken back immediately to California, extradited back to California, and I was charged with armed bank robbery. I pled guilty to armed bank robbery, and I received 20 years for that. I was immediately sent to prison out there. I forgot it already. Steelecombe, Washington. Sorry, his name is. You might remember it. Out there in Steelecombe, Washington. Anyway, I'm sorry, but it was an island in Steelecombe, Washington, the federal prison. No. This was up in north in the state of Washington.
McNeil Island.
McNeil Island. I'm sorry, McNeil Island, and it was sort of like it was Alcatraz in a way, because when you get taken out there, you put in a little boat, you're shackled and everything, and you're taken out there, and it's foggy, it's raining. When you get there, you go, I don't see nothing until you get to the walls, and there's huge walls, and when they open up the door, it says prison inside. You go, where am I at? And you're in a prison, and it's in an island out there in Washington. But anyway, I was put in solitary confinement there before I hit population. Most prisoners go into a solitary confinement before you classify. And what the impact of it was that I was put in there with some of the prisoners who had been in Alcatraz at the time, and I talked with prisoners who had been at McNeil Island. And the stories they told me, and being there with them, I couldn't even imagine. It's just like, the movies that you saw about James Cagney and all these, Paul Mooney and prisoners, rising with cups on the bars. That was true. I was able to speak to Rafael Miranda later on, one of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Five, fighting for the independence of Puerto Rico. And I had talked to Rafael, and I said, and Rafael, how was it? He said, you don't even want to know. And I was able to talk to some old mob guys, who were in the mafia. And this is how they talk. Kid, you don't even want to know. I was, I just want to wrap this up. But I was from McNeil Island because I was from New York. I was sent to Lewisburg Penitentiary. So now I'm at Lewisburg Penitentiary, and me and two other inmates attempted an escape out of Lewisburg. Because in the Black Panther Party, this is what we believe, that we're at war with America, and we still believe that. So we consider ourselves POWs, political prisoners. So my whole thinking when I got to prison was escape. So it was botched. They shot us off the roof. Nobody fortunately got hurt. But I was placed in solitary confinement in Lewisburg. This is how Lewisburg solitary confinement is, for some of you who don't know about it. It's the bottom half sits above ground. The bottom doesn't. The glass was painted black. You couldn't see outside. No sunlight came in or out. There was no ventilation. And the prisoners there, they were only given at that time was a Bible. And your family had to go down there to visit you. And so when you were down there with a Bible, you know, the only thing you had on was your clothes, and they gave you some socks and the Bible. And you woke up every morning with a nosebleed because there was no ventilation. And so, working together with some of the people who were supporters of prison rights, in conjunction with them, you know, we were able to form the Lewisburg Prison Project. And so they helped us obtain a lawyer, and we filed a class action suit, which was called Jordan, for one of the prisoners who was also down there, Jordan versus the Bureau of Prisons. And so we were able to get, you know, the windows, you know, they had to scratch, you know, they scratch the window, get ventilation. We were able to get better visits. We can now get books. And so, you know, we had changed that. But, you know, and that speaks to also, you know, us as political prisoners who've been in prison, like Albert, like, you know, and the Angola brothers, you know, who fought for prison rights and had, you know, helped change the conditions in prison. And my being there, you know, I realized, you know, we had help, you know, we were forerunners in helping to, you know, make that push for prison rights. But solitary confinement, and I just want to give you this bit. Here's how it is, because every prison I went to, I was put in solitary confinement, and there's people who've been there long term, and this is the way it goes when you go there. Just like this guy said he cut up, I was put in a prison when I've been in transport, and prisoners are standing across from each other. Hey, we want more food. And you're going, what? Oh no, we want some more food. You know, we get our meals, but some prisoners want more, but they began to change dramatically mentally. And I've seen prisoners just, you know, right across myself, and they'll actually take out their arm with crude weapons, and I'm talking about wires, whatever. I mean, this is not a blade, you know, like, you know, we're gonna cut ourselves if this is brutal, violent stuff. When they talk about hitting themselves on against the wall, not hitting themselves up against the wall. Them guys take them toilet bowl, break them, pick up that piece and bam! Now I'm going like, whoa, this is serious, you know. I've been around something, and so I've seen that type of behavior, and prisoners, for no reason at all, attack another one and practically kill him. You know, that was their intention, to kill him, because they heard that a prisoner had said something to him. So imagine being there 40 years. Just imagine that for 40 years. I got a whiff of that for months. Yeah, but imagine that for 40 years, what that man went through. And what we're still being subjected to. Because we're still being subjected to those types of conditions. That hasn't changed.
Amazing. Wow. So I just want to explain this for everybody else who don't know this and understand this, you know. Me and Robert has done so many reports with so many organizers. As an organizer, we have to sort of shed light on every category and also prove, because in America, you have to show harm to show wrong. You just can't say, oh, this is wrong. It's like, well, how is it wrong, right? So one of the greatest things that I know that Robert, who gets a lot of people to work together, was he actually was able to gather the top 3 psychs on the planet Earth. Stuart Grassi and Terry Cupper and Craig Haney working together, which is amazing. All from different major educational institutions as well, which was even more complicated. And one of the reports, which I just want to speak a little bit about, because you were talking about mental health and illness inside, right, how people deteriorate. So there was a reason why Juan Mendez, who works at the Anti-Torture Initiative, said that over 14 days is cruel and unusual punishment. It is not because he felt that 2 weeks keeping your kids locked in a room on punishment is cruel. No, it is because Craig Haney was actually the one who did the NASA report years ago in his early years around the brain deficiency and the brain deterioration. Because NASA wanted to know what happens if our astronauts get lost in space. You know, the body goes through atrophy. We already have science about that, but the brain is sort of like this muscle type organ that we don't understand how it deteriorates. And it does. So after 14 days, the brain starts to deteriorate from normal human reactions. Let me just give you a little technical on this. So everybody ever heard the statement, you know, you must have dropped your head when you was a kid, right? That's actually true. A blunt force trauma to your cerebral cortex will change the way that your decision-making pattern is, and it changes the function of the brain. But inside the cerebral cortex is another cortex called the somatosensory cortex. Doctors call it touch. It is basically how your brain sort of responds to your body. Your fingertips are sort of like your antennae. You have a subconscious in the back of your brain that sort of stores memory, right? Everybody know how the subconscious works, right? You see two people on a bike, you see somebody dressed like Ronald McDonald, you bump into somebody think like your mother, you go to bed, you have a dream that your mother's riding a bike with Ronald McDonald and two people, right? So your brain sort of puts this together to figure things out later. So it's a huge working mechanism that impacts the body as well. So the somatosensory cortex is literally like the fingertips of the antennae of the human body. Even if you're in the tub, right? The body's saying to the brain is saying to the body, well, you may call this bathing, we call this drowning. So we're going to sort of shrivel up your fingertips so that you have suction cups, because the body knows that the body has no grip underwater. This is why your toes and your fingertips get wrinkly. So the brain is very detailed. And inside the somatosensory cortex, it connects to your optical nerve, which basically is the 613 nerve endings running down the back of your brain into your optical nerve. So everything you see, you're making a decision in the moment, right? Like I'm talking to my son, he's playing on his phone, his body language is telling me he's not listening to me. I can come up with a decision on that and say, okay, you're not even paying me attention while I'm talking, right? So all of that in an instant is cut off. After 14 days, your body starts to reroute neurological receptors to not feeling certain things, to seeing certain things. So when you see people hallucinating and really going through this traumatic, it is a physical torture. This is why Robert says it is cruel and unusual and unconstitutional punishment, because this is irreparable damage. You know, he also helped me produce a film called Prison Kids, which is about youth in solitary, because we spent about $5 billion just locking up kids. And you have to remember, you know, and I didn't want to shift the focus. At one time I said, I thought our focus was on elders. He said, I went in with a kid. So the damage has been setting in, you know. So when we speak about human rights, you know, as we're on the cusp of a lot of women's rights and a lot of women's movements today, you know, it's hard for people to imagine how it must be for a woman back in the movement and back in the days when literally it was a lot more repression going on, you know? So I wanted to ask you about your experiences, because here you are with comrades who are going into prison for a long time and never coming home, you know? What were some of your experiences with the women? As a woman.
First of all, I'd like to say free all prisoners.
Yes.
Free 'em all.
What's the call?
Free 'em all.
All right, we just saw this very, very powerful film about these brothers called the Angola 3. I know two of these brothers very well. I'm here today, I'm going to just take the move over just a little bit, because we are talking about cruel and unusual. I'm going to talk about the sisters that no longer have a voice. I'm going to talk about exile just for a little bit. I'm going to talk about the sisters, the sister warriors that have transitioned and are with their ancestors who have worked till they died. I'm talking about Safia Bukhari, if anybody knows who that is. I'm talking about the Asada Shakurs. I'm talking about the Fanny Shakurs, the Diane Jenkinses. I'm talking about these sisters that never did anything for themselves, including their health. I'm talking about Asada and Charlotte O'Neill that had to go into exile. And I asked Charlotte when she was here from Tanzania, I said, what is exile like? Because first of all, you gotta know what home is like. Even though we were brought here against our will and had to work and toil the land, this is the only home we know. To be separated from that home is cruel and unusual in itself. They have lost loved ones. They cannot see their children. Asada has never been able to handle her grandchildren. You know, we're talking about things that are cruel and unusual, and let's talk about the children. What about these children who have grown up without a parent, sometimes both, because their parents was in jail, because they were freedom fighters and they were speaking out against injustices. I ran into a little brother that's part of the Africa movement who said he was 17 years old before he was able to see his parents. And that was behind, 4 or 5 inches of blacks. So there was no touching, there was no embrace. There was, what about those children with those issues that have grown up without a parent, that desperately needed a parent? We're talking about cruel and unusual living in the United States of America. If you're black and oppressed, if you're from a third world nation, if you're indigenous from what I want to say is when we came up in the Black Panther Party and we saw that some things just aren't right, and we understood if one of us is not free, then none of us is not free. So it was a collective fight for all of us to be free. And when we say free all political prisoners, we're talking about all political prisoners. It's really funny, when you think about what we went through when we were really struggling in the party, because most of the sisters did not think that they would be living at the age of 25. We all thought we'd be dead by then. I mean, they weren't just shooting brothers and locking up brothers, they were doing it to the sisters. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover didn't give a shit about gender. So, and then when you think about the things that you have seen, or that you have heard about, or that you have actually lived through, you're wondering, I was put here for a reason, and the struggle continues because, our children and our grandchildren, do we want them to grow up like we had to grow up? Because it has not been easy. And what was your question?
No, that you explained it. You explained it well. I mean, I think that sometimes, in the movement today, there is a huge struggle. Organizers and activists struggle to still do the work. And I had a conversation with Omar not too long ago. And Omar told me, he said, when Fred Hampton was killed, I didn't think I would live to see 25. And then I didn't think I would live to see 35. And then 45 and 55. And I realized that I spent all my time in the movement, and I haven't even lived, because you live in that struggle. And, he gets on me, because he's like, you're still doing things the way we did. You're still doing things that you feel that selflessly you can give everything to the movement, because how can you take away from the movement, right? So, I want to pose a question to both of y'all, as an advice to young organizers and activists and people who are post-incarcerated leaders who came home to fight against half the odds that y'all have faced coming home and living in the movement. I mean, literally death every day. Cops really trying to kill you, even though it still happens today, but this is pervasive front page. What things do you see should be done in this struggle different?
Well, first of all, I just want to address this briefly. One common thread we all have that are in the struggle is that we never thought that we were going to be to live to a certain age, right? To get old, to have children, you know, to see our families again, because we understood the nature of the struggle. We also understood our opponent. We understood America. We understood, we still do understand what they're capable of. They will murder you. They will kill you. They will assassinate you. And they will imprison you for life and keep you under harsh conditions if they can't break you. And we who are out here are fortunate enough to be out here because of your support, because somehow there was a window for us and we were able to get by. You know, so keep that in mind. Some might see people who get arrested. You know, I said, I was out there for civil disobedience. Never been in jail. And they put them out in general population. You know. And, you know, things happen. But I just, you know, I'm telling you, who you're up against and, you know, who we've been up against. But we've taken on the fight, and because for us, there is no way to go. We're fighting for our rights. We're fighting for our families. We're fighting for justice. We're fighting for independence. We're fighting for a level playing field. And so that's what I want to tell young people, you know, that it's about your life. It's about your family. It's about your mother, your brother, your father, your sister. Do you want to keep passing that torch? Because I got a torch. Unbeknownst to my father and mother, maybe they didn't know, but I think deep down inside they did. Because every time I went out and I said, hey, I'm going to do this. First thing my mother would say to me, you know what you're doing? My father would say, mijo, take it easy. But they just wanted to know if we knew or I knew what I was doing. And so because they understood, they understood our conditions. And looking around to my friends, their parents, it was the same thing. You know, understood the injustice and the oppression which we live in. You don't have to tell black people, you know, there's racism in America.
This is America.
You know, and think you're enlightening them. They'll look at you like, you know, we got a couple of Puerto Ricans that, you know, hey, you know, we're a colony because different conditions, you know, different circumstances, but you got, you know, different struggle, but you still got to say, you know, you got to fight through the brainwashing, you know, but common oppressor.
No, that's a very powerful fact. I think that the youth today don't have the history, don't have the knowledge, they don't have the self-identity, they don't understand the struggle, you know.
I'd like to just interject on that. I remember our parents used to have a saying, you know, that you can't fight City Hall. Can't fight City Hall. You know, I know you guys might not have heard that, but us who have a little age, we've heard it. And what is amazing to me is that the Black Panther Party and the other people of conscience that went out to fight, we went beyond City Hall. We went to fight this whole government. And, you know, the commitment was there and the will was there, but sometimes the thought process was not there. I would not tell young people today to struggle in the same manner that we struggled. But then, you know, in our time, J. Edgar Hoover had set a death warrant for all of us. Now they just killing folks because they can. You know, so you gotta organize around that. You know, there is no age to be an activist. You can be 5 years old and be an activist. You know, whatever you're passionate about. We spoke in front of it was 98th graders. BJ was a part of that. And, you know, it's like whatever you're passionate about, you stand up and you talk about it. If you don't like bullies, you stand up against the bullies. Well, United States of America was the biggest bully on this earth. Because they have their hands and their legs and their tentacles all over the hemisphere. You know, and we would say, if you don't like the fact that people are running around punching grandmothers out, stand up against it. You know, stand for something. I think Malcolm said it best when he said, if you don't stand for something, then you'll stand for anything. You'll fall for anything. So I mean, you know, that in itself, you know, but we don't want the young, and we want the young people to stand and be heard, but the way things are going now, you know, they're like on the scene after the fact. You know, we want them to be able to stop stuff from happening. You know, if you look at the Black Panther Party, and when we joined the party, you know, we were kids. We were 6, but you know, now, you know, they go out and they protest, and you know, and we did it too. We did it too. But you know, it's like they're Johnny come lately. It's like, you know, stop something from happening. If you see something, stand up then. Don't wait until it hits the news and then come out. And you know, because that was like being reactionary.
Right.
You know, if you're gonna be on the forefront, to be on the forefront, but be smart about it.
No, I think you're right. I mean, far too many times, you know, we see so many advocates, because there's over 1 million nonprofits even in just New York City alone. It's incredible the amount of sort of inclusion we have. And this is why one of the projects in INC does is we bring organizations together to work together. And you see so much reaction, about issues and conditions when you have to say no to prisons, but also build communities at the same time. And I think that's where the lesson is lost. The Panthers were building communities, providing survival programs, doing the resources, babysitting, literally daycare while one black mother goes to work because the father's incarcerated. So it became a system of community simultaneously while you're creating the bills and legislation and taking on not only Capitol Hill, but the world, right? So it has to be done in both contexts. And it's great to be an advocate and an activist today and be out there and saying this is a problem, but what's the solution? You're the solution inside your community, right? And I think that also, I just want to put a little plug here. One of the things that BJ and the alumni is doing is teaching classes inside of colleges and universities, but bringing back the 10-point platform and program as an educational platform, because, you know, I mentioned to my kids, hey, let's watch Roots, and they're like, oh, the media channel? And I'm like, no. They're like, oh, the cartoon? I'm like, no. Matter of fact, this is totally not that, right? So I think that they miss that history, which brings self-pride, but also brings that little bit of rage and that anger that says, I'm going to make a change. I'm not going to be a victim, right? And I think that was the real fear of members in the party as well. I want to thank all y'all for coming. I definitely want to ask you some final thoughts. And I also want to ask questions from the audience, yes, so we can create an interactive conversation. So last thoughts and maybe some comments and maybe your reflection as what Claudia said about reactionary versus community building and also being a solution-based, stopping it from happening, right?
Yes, we have to always keep in mind that we're fighting a system.
Right.
That, you know, that we're just not fighting for prison reform. You know, if you can change the system, then everything starts, you know, you'll have more of an impact. But if we keep the same system in place, and for me it's capitalism, imperialism, you know, then we got a basis to work. Then we don't have to interfere in foreign wars. Then we can start respecting the sovereignty of nations. We can address, you know, I was listening to a UN representative, a European from the European Union. I just want to give you the tidbit. And I was listening to him, and he said, they were asking him questions. I think he was on democracy now with Amy Goodman, and he was asking questions. And she asked him a question, well, what do you think about it? And he said, you know, we try to give universal health care, free education, you know, the basic for any citizen, you know, food, clothing, shelter, work, right, what everybody should have. He said, thing about America that's frustrating is that it can do all those things in 24 hours.
No doubt.
It has the resources to do all those things, implement all those things in 24 hours. He said it drives us in Europe crazy when we watch that. You see? And so I'd like to do that. I'd like to, have free health care, so everybody can have a job, food, clothing, and shelter, the basics of life, and non-interference in the affairs of other nations, and help others and the environment. That's what I like.
Well, the Black Panther Party wrote that down, put that down to paper in 1966, and here we are still discussing the very same basic human needs right now today. How many years do we have to discuss it before it's actually implemented? When the Black Panther Party was at its height, each and every, wherever there was a hood, there was a branch. Because we were trying to show the people, by example, this is what we need to do for our community. Nobody should have to live with rats and roaches, and nobody should have to, not go to school because they don't have clothes. Nobody should be hungry in the home of the brave and the land of the free. That's a contradiction there. So wherever there was a hood, there was a branch. So if this was happening all over the United States of America, but the people up there on Capitol Hill, it was so embarrassing to them that they was like, oh my God, we can't let this out. We gotta quiet that down, and then Malcolm, as quiet as it's kept, was killed because he said, I'm gonna take the plight of black people all the way to the UN. They could not have that happening so that everybody all over the world could see America for just what it was, which is a racist, decadent, capitalistic, whatever you want to say, that's what it was. And they could not let it be shown. The worst thing, for some people down south, that guy Buddy in this thing, he's probably one of them, when they showed the marches that Martin Luther King were leading in Selma, and the police dogs were set on kids, and the fire hoses were set on the people, and it went viral because the TV caught it. That was the black eye. So he had to go. So it's anybody that stood up and said, oh, I am outraged, this cannot happen, was ultimately
Snuffed out.
assassinated. Any group of people that band together to do that was ultimately disbanded, as in the case of the Black Panther Party. But I say that to say this: no matter what happened as far as the party is concerned, the people in the Black Panther Party kept those principles and kept those morals, and conscious or unconscious, they still serving the people. I went to a sisters retreat, and 6 of them were nurses, 8 of them were teachers. There were social workers and artists and journalists and musicians. So whatever they did later on in life still reflected the principles of the Black Panther Party to serve the people.
Yes, I wanted to open up for Q&A if anybody had questions.
A couple of quick things. When Louisiana arbitrarily confined the Angola 3 to solitary confinement, which was not their sentence,
Right.
They were found guilty, but they were not sentenced to solitary confinement, so that was arbitrary, right? Okay, so I was wondering, okay, where was the ACLU? And my other thing is, solitary confinement, how is that even, it's so clearly a violation of the Bill of Rights. How is it, who justifies it that, I mean, as I see it, it should be eliminated. How is it that it is justified in any form?
Right.
And the third thing, how can one attorney general, this Buddy Caldwell, have so much power? I mean, he's not the king. I don't understand how one, that's it. Those were my three.
No, it is mind-blowing. One, solitary confinement is a disciplinary infraction process inside the facility. So no one is in solitary for a crime that they've committed or quote-unquote offended community in some sense, right? So these are all institutional rule violations. When the ACLU did a report, we did a report years ago with Robert called Boxed In about New York State. It showed that 5 out of 6 tickets in New York State were for non-violent rule infractions, like looking at an officer, literally, having too much postage stamps, having 2 pillows, and it became sort of, you have to understand that there's a financial component and there's a historical component, right? When people ask me about solitary, I always show this little clip from Django when they're pulling his wife out of the ground in a hole in the box, because when did we stop using solitary? Right? We never did. So as slavery has manifested into the prison industrial complex through black codes, through convict leasing, and then creating, okay, well, you overseers are going to be officers, and we're going to start putting positions out, and sort of the indented contractors, right, then we're all employed because they have to take care of the plantations, right? So this system has transferred into the prison industrial complex as it is today, and some of the tortures from that has come through. Do you remember the hitching post? We used to just put people in their hands and hold them up there in the center of town. That's a punishment in juvenile facilities in solitary. So if the kids act out, they put their hands through the feeding slot and they have to stay in there for 8 or 10 hours on a shift, right? So we still have these torturous sort of components to American history. Like, you know, one day an activist threw a banner over the baseball game and said, baseball is as American as racism, because it is. You know, these sort of institutions was grounded in the foundation of this system. So punishment and cruel and unusual punishment beyond that. I didn't kind of comprehend that until I could sort of bring it to the eye real quick. I'm in a community, I'm in a neighborhood, you're in a project, you're hanging out, you go to see a friend, the cops pull up, they jump out, they ask you for ID, pat you down, and they're threatening to send you to jail. You get to jail, I'm in the prison yard, I'm sitting on a bench, a little scooter comes up, the COs jump out, you got ID? Like, what do you mean? They searching me, patting me down, talking about they're gonna send me to jail. I'm already in jail. I said, oh no, this is not jail. There's a couple of floors down up under the jail that we can send you to, and that is what solitary confinement is. So it is the dungeon of mass incarceration. It is also a place that Robert has unified everybody, women, men, mentally ill, aging, LGBTQ category, that is thrown into solitary. So everyone is there. You ask for protective custody, they'll put you there. They ask you if you don't need protection, they find out you need protection, they'll put you in involuntary protective custody. If your political views are different, you become the security control unit. So you have all these different names, but there is no unit called solitary confinement, and they don't admit to it. Here in New York State, we use solitary confinement 4 times over the national average, more than anyone else, and you pay $200,000 per person per year, even though we roughly keep 4,000 to 5,000 people in solitary. We have supermax facilities, like the whole jail is that. We pay $76 million just for Southport and upstate alone. And there's 70-something counties and 2 facilities, 62 counties, 70-something facilities, and 2 women facilities. So you spend a lot on prison, and we invest into it. Until you sort of, this is why we do these educational projects, because until you know about it, you don't realize that you're paying for this, right? And everyone is directly impacted, the family, the kids, the mother, the guards themselves, even in that environment, because they think they're protecting society against somebody when they're mentally damaging them and then blaming them for the environment. And then Buddy, right? This is a man who controlled the entire county. This is a man that allowed the rodeo to happen. You know, it's crazy when I first watched Stir Crazy with Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder talking about Angola prison and really trying to raise awareness about the clownness of it, that they have this convict poker game where, you know, whatever person incarcerated remains in the seat or lives through it gets like a $50 store buy, right? So he had that much control to create an income producing environment in that county and literally hold it. But if you do the history, then I would challenge you, you can go to our website and look up the other films as well. You can see the history of Angola, that it actually was a slave plantation. Like, this is a person who said, the prison itself said, even when you die, we're just gonna bury you in the back and use you as fertilizer. You can't even have the body once you're gone. So this is the worst sort of prison, and it holds a lot of juveniles for life, right? So it's the history of it on top of the politics of it.
What's your website?
Yes, incarceratednation.org.
And I'd just like to add that, don't forget, Louisiana is one of those states where they advocate states' rights. So Buddy saw himself as, right, an advocate of states' rights, and he wasn't even, you know, acknowledging the court orders from the federal government. If they're not controlling the federal government, they're against the federal government.
Before we take the next question, I want to recognize the other political prisoners in this room and leaders in itself. Sekou had a question, comment.
You just kind of ran
Ran
past
through
it.
it. Sorry about that. Yes, sir.
You're talking about ending solitary confinement. I was wondering, was there anything being done to try to shut down some of these prisons that are total solitary confinement, like Florence, for instance?
Yes, sir.
There's a couple of other ones in the country that's all it is. Everybody's in solitary confinement.
Starting with Marion, you know, the country started supermaxing prisons, and what we did, sad to say, we have a governor who his father was his predecessor, right? So his father spent $1 million per unit trying to create double-cell units when he started with 5 points. And then when he constructed the rest, he realized that people weren't going to the box. Like, this wasn't a problem in New York State. People weren't really doing a lot of bad things in the prison system that landed them to solitary, right? An immense amount of the facilities he built, because he built 200 facilities. I mean, 200 to hold 200 people. So they started dropping sort of the reasons why you end up to the box. It went from reckless eyeballing, actually looking at an officer, to hoarding, passing material, right? The problem is that the system will always reinvent itself, comrade, right? And we allow these organizations to do sort of patchwork, fixing the system, as we say, right? We'll do a bill here, they'll invite me, Dolores, and Robert out to DC and talk about how they're gonna change this and just fix it, right? There's no fixing something that is torturous, and there's no fixing it when it's a system that's built on a racist slavery and the conditions from centuries ago. So we have the only organization, the A3 International Anti-Torture Initiative, which is asking for the closing of supermaxes. We're tired of asking the ACLU. We're tired of Amnesty, and Amnesty UK was the one who was actually helping the US, because you see Amnesty International here in the United States, you think, oh, they were fighting for Angola 3. No, I had to call Tessa from London just to do a film screening here in New York, like literally to organize around this issue. So, no, there is no one doing it but us. And our, yes sir. And our total standpoint is that it is cruel and unusual punishment, and it is against constitutional law. And so Vince Warren and the Center for Constitutional Rights are working with us to basically establish that as a fighting defense force, right? Norway copies our style of saying, we just don't do cruel and unusual punishment. You know, there is no solitary facilities in those facilities, and people live normally. They're just isolated from society. That is the punishment of incarceration. So we have to look at that, and no other organization's doing it because they know money in it. And that's the real finances.
Yeah,
So that's
the
real
prison
deal.
system is big business.
Yeah.
That's big money making business now. I want to talk a little bit about Albert and Herman and King, and the reason why they were in solitary for the length of time that they were in, because they could not, the prison officials could not let them be in main population because they would talk. They kept them in solitary like that because they didn't want them to talk.
And that strength to pass on.
They didn't want them to pass on the message and the information and the education. They said we have to shut it down, and the only way that we can do this is to keep them isolated.
And I just want to add, briefly, when Robert Kennedy years ago, that was John F. Kennedy's brother, the president at the time, Premier Khrushchev from Russia came, he was on tour, he came to visit America, and he came through, San Francisco, and he saw Alcatraz sitting out there, and he says, oh, this is what greets democracy, America, this is democracy. And the then Attorney General at the time, Robert Kennedy, said, what? Close that thing down. So they closed down Alcatraz, which was supposed to be one of the worst prisons in America. So they sent most people to where? Marion, Illinois, and they set up H unit, right, which was, that's the solitary of the solitary, and prisoners developed all kind of mental health issues that we've been discussing. So then people said, all right, let's close it down. And then they built Florence and other prisons, where attorneys have a hard time getting in to see you. So this is part of the problem, what I'm saying, we can't do patchwork. We have to change the system. Because so long as we're out there fighting, they'll incarcerate us. Even when we're not fighting, they'll incarcerate us. That's the whole thing. Look at these youth walking around. They're not fighting, and they're being picked up and incarcerated.
Money.
The right to vote is taken away from them. You're not a citizen, right? The right to citizenship, if you have a right to vote. If they take away that right to vote, you're not a citizen in the eyes of America. Think about that. So they take your citizenship away.
I'd like to say one more thing about Albert. When Albert came home and I was able to speak with him one-on-one, he let me know something that a lot of people don't know or wasn't put out there widely. But Albert said he could have been released 19 years earlier. They said all he had to do was renounce his Pantherism. That's all he had to do was renounce his Pantherism. And when he talks about they will not break me, I mean, you have not seen a more humble, intelligent, loving person as Albert Woodfox.
I mean, when we was advocating for Herman, and I was doing all the screenings at Herman's house, and we was traveling the world trying to bring this attention to solitary confinement, I would write to him. He said, worry about Herman, don't worry about me. And it just struck me like this man has spent, my and my brother's time of life in prison, and he's like, no, don't worry about him. Worry about Herman first, right?
When they were bringing Herman home in the ambulance, you saw it in the clip, and they were bringing Herman home in the ambulance, and you heard the people in the streets, the cheering, and Herman said, what's that noise? And the lawyer said, they're screaming for you. They're saying, welcome home. The first thing he said was, what about Albert? We gotta get Albert out. Yeah. And he was dying. So, it's
one of the strategies Paul says, Albert says, is boutique activism. He said, we can't attack one state because they'll just build two over here. And with the federal system, it's different from the state system where they can put you anywhere. So by the time you tear down TAMs or trying to focus on one facility, they will tear down the most. He said, what we need to do is create a national, international collective where we have post-incarcerated leaders that will focus on their state and at the same time put the pressure to shut down facilities, right? One of the things that I didn't get a chance to answer, ma'am, is the answer is you, right? Citizenship. You as a citizen of the city, you have the right to reach out to your constituents. Let me ask you, do you know who your assemblyman is? Do you know who your city council member is? Do you know who your senator is? Even a handwritten letter that's saying, well, why am I paying $76 million for a facility that doesn't, help me? And when my neighbors get moved to another county, that county's getting the resources. This is the reason why you have less schools in your community. This is the reason why you have less programs in your community. And this is the reason why you have less resources for your family, is because when a family member is taken away, the next community gets it. It's gerrymandering. It's a whole lot of politics involved, and your citizenship is the key. There's regular meetings at the Board of Corrections that we do, and there's regular hearings and testimonies in the state that you can actually use your citizenship as a voice. even just signing the petition, signing up for the release of aging people in prison, because this is the most non-threatening population returning home from jail. Like, what are you gonna do after a point of, time? So, other questions? Tariq? Yes. Tariq.
I'm thinking people should know that we are sitting here after we have been exposed to like millions of incidences, millions of examples of America being free and fair. And that's why we don't see the urgency of the situation, because the actual situation is like beyond imagination. When you're in prison and dealing with them on that level, these people, you see the real America. That's why they call it the real America, because America is really run by a gang of crazy people. And when I was in there, and
Now led by a crazy leader, right?
The guards would come around and say, "We could kill you at any moment. If I tell you to shut up, shut your fucking mouth." That's the way it is in prison. So we watch TV, and we are here after seeing TV, seeing all these instances of America being free and fair. Well, people don't know that they are deliberately putting this propaganda out, so people won't know the urgency of the situation. There are a lot of Albert Wood foxes in there. When I was in solitary confinement, the guard would run by my cell, "You're gonna commit suicide." And then I don't even know which guard that was. And another one would run by and say, "Pressure will bust a pipe." These people are terrible. And you can't imagine it because you've been exposed to millions of incidents of propaganda.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that's one of the problems. We think that there's a law and justice episode for every court case. We think that there's this, hyper-masculine lawyers and, great defense and a judge who's just perplexed about doing justice and sentencing, when it's actually a supermarket style of just repetitive incarceration. We live in a state, in a country where over 80% of plea bargains, but in New York State it's over 90% of cases of plea bargains, which means nobody's going to trial. There is no justice. There is no jury appeals, because we don't go to jury duty. we don't go to jury duty. And so we have to start educating ourselves and creating events where we can then be on top of activism, but also a top-down activism, not boutique activism, not reactionary, but shut down the complex, like Sekou said, the entire facility itself, right? Not focusing on fixing it or tweaking the system or writing this bill is going to change this. Yes, I understand pressure because I've had a cast on. I've done time in prison. I know the little break makes a big difference. Yes, that's necessary, but we have to have a force to total abolition, and I think that is the problem. Sorry. Yes, Queen.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to say, and based on what Tariq said, the film was really a powerful film, but a lot of what is missing when we talk about, like, it makes it seem like that's an anomaly, right? We have there are 13 members of the Black Panther Party who were still in prison.
Yes.
40 years, 45 years. Sekou did 33 years. More than half of that was in solitary confinement. Sundiata Acoli has done a number of years in solitary confinement. So the act of, the Black Panther Party was about resistance. And when they tell these when these things are done, it really doesn't talk about punishment in that way as because you resisted. Right? So people are in prison because they resisted. And then people are not making movies about the Black Panther Party and those people who are political prisoners. They can make a movie about someone because it's a crime against humanity for people to be held in solitary confinement. And that's true, right? But it's also, we have a right to resist, but people don't pick up on, well, let's tell the story about, and this is not necessarily for you, I'm saying this for people when we watch these movies, to know that there's a larger context of why Woodfox and Wallace and King were put in solitary confinement, and that's not an anomaly. Every one of our political prisoners, those who are living and those who have died in prison, have served decades in solitary confinement. And I would like to see people, even when they tell these stories, to add that there's a context of the repression of Woodfox and King and Wallace, because they were part of a movement of revolutionary struggle that uses solitary confinement against people who resist.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm glad you mentioned that because it gives me a way to plug this, right? So we actually did another film called Breaking Down the Box, which is a continuing series. And we went to the ACLU to get funding to support it. We produced it on our own with NARCRAT. It got international attention. It won a lot from the humanities sort of section of advocates and organizers. And they wouldn't give us a dime to help us reproduce it. And they said, well, you know, we're litigators. This is what we do. We bargain. We sort of, you know, work out grievances. And no one is against abolition like us. So we're using this film as a point to raise funds and to raise enough money to continue the Breaking Down Box series so that we can highlight each political prisoner, and solitary confinement itself is an extreme category. It's the funding, right? I remember sitting in a meeting in DC and Langeloff and Soros pulled me in the elevator, me and Dolores, and they're like, oh, there's a, you know, I see you in the front page and in the centerfold with Juan Mendez, and you're a national organizer with ACL. I don't get paid for that shit. I don't get paid for that. They put me on the panel, give us a little $500, put us in the Marriott, and do the trauma porn. You know, those days are over with. You know, we've had sort of helped them enough, and I've lost my faith in the system helping the system. It's not going to happen, right? The little legal defenses we needed to make those sort of changes in the facilities, we already have. We've inspired enough of young lawyers doing that. So it's us to us, and it's up to the elders as well, to put an abolition umbrella over it, right? And saying that we're about totality abolition of the prison system, starting with the most torturous, starting from the dungeon, because upliftment starts from reaching down, and we got to start at the basement. And it just so happens that that's where all the political prisoners are at, stuck in the basement, hidden away from society. And we need those educators. Uncle Shaq, another Panther strong in the room. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just in terms of this whole solitary issue, you know, I do most of my work in the streets.
Yes, sir.
You know, in the community, on the subways or whatever. And I found, like, over the years, just handing out leaflets and flyers, that I'll have, you know, brothers mostly come up to me and say, oh, I knew Sheik No. You know, he taught me this.
Mm-hmm.
Or Jalil, you know, taught these classes here. And they'll mention people, you know, who eventually did maybe get into general population. And I've seen like dozens and dozens of them. Even some who say, oh, I remember you used to feed me, you know, the breakfast program. And you know, when you're in the street and you hear this, you know, then you really understand why they don't want, you know, I think it was already said here already, they don't want people who are politically conscious in general, and Panthers in particular, to be in general population, because that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We're going to serve, we're going to educate, raise the consciousness of the people. But when you hear that, it really lets you see why they do that. They're afraid to put them in there. I know when Schultz finally got put in jail, it was like a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what's going to happen. Because the show's going to be there regardless if it's on this side of the wall, that side, or in that dungeon that you mentioned. You're still going to struggle. And, you know, that's really inspiring when you hear that. I just wish a lot of those brothers would be able to get more involved and write back. You know, I tell them, well, write, you know, Jalil, tell them that you appreciate that. Or let Seth know this, you know, so, you know, you see that when you're in the street doing the work.
No, you're powerful. Yeah, that's a superpower important fact. I do a lot of reentry services, so people make that the first stop when they come home, right? And so many people have come out that Jalil has trained, that has actually influenced and empowered, right? They're creative movement. Look at the whole Victory Food Alliance, him and Herman Bell run, right? This is something that actually created a system where prisoners are not working in the farms, and the farmers are actually bringing fresh produce to the community, and also family members are then being able to visit their loved ones because the jail just cut off the prison bus services, right? So we see that those most oppressed have the most to give. And there's another film, if you go to our YouTube channel and subscribe, on incarceratednation.org, you can watch Herman's House. And Herman's House, you see how many people that that Herman Wallace had actually supported and came home leaders and activists, right? That they've actually grown that inside. And I think that that's the danger, and we're not going to allow that to stop. And this is why we're trying to actually do the work on the outside as well. And in the community, we hear that. But I think that it's honestly, Shep, so many people are compounded by oppression when they come home, right? That they have to be in the shelter, they're disenfranchised from this, they can't do that. Like next thing you know, a month doesn't get by, you haven't sent the package back, you haven't, you know, and this is why sort of the check-in that we provide. We say, all right, give me the last 3 pages in your Bible, and we're gonna write everybody that you said you was gonna write, we'll write to them, and we'll send them a package, and we'll keep in communication. That's how we've sort of built up our membership list. you know? And it be times that Jalil is going through so much in jail, and he will still send me somebody else's caseload. Like, here's a whole million envelope with all these stamps in it, like 51 penny stamps. And he would send me somebody else's work, you know? Put this in the parole project, which is another project that he fostered and mentored, which is hosted by the National Lawyers Guild, and is doing actually right now, doing the work to help prepare parole packages. So I want to thank everybody for coming out. Is there questions, last minute? Yes.
The Innocence Project,
Yes.
you're familiar with that, right?
Yeah, and one of the reasons why I'm home, yeah.
Right, okay. I wanted to ask, in your opinion, how many of the people that the Innocence Project has helped to set free were actually Panthers?
None.
None.
Exactly, I don't think.
And then my question.
Well, I mean, none that didn't have the support and the legal support from another, right?
Do you think they're shying away from?
No, no. So when the Innocence Project was established, let's just say this, the government invested in that because they were like, we're about to get more convictions with DNA than we would exonerations. But it actually turned out to pan out the other way. And with the Innocence Project, which a lot of people may not know, is a franchise. So they have one New York organization, and they allow other states to do sort of that and
Because I did
replicate
some
it.
volunteer work
I know.
years ago with one of the attorneys
Right.
who was an assistant volunteering himself on the Innocence Project, and he needed some secretarial assistance with lists being developed from state to state to state, all different locations, and I was helping him out with that for a little while. But
I mean, the list is, don't get me wrong, I do know them a lot, and they have an immense amount of lists. There's over 1 million something people,
Right.
cases that get pushed in, to the point that Jeffrey Desakovich, who was exonerated himself, was one of the first people who got that 40 million mark in New York State. He was locked up since he was 16. He started the Jeffrey Desakovich Foundation. And then you have Absolutely Innocent, which was started by Zulay Velasquez and Shabaka, who was actually mentored by Jalil and came home and started his own foundation.
I heard that one, yeah.
Right. So these organizations started doing the work because the Innocence Project, as a conglomerate and as an organization, wouldn't shy away from their prime directive, you know?
Yeah,
And it
that's-
becomes an income-producing system for them. I'm not saying that what they do is bad. I love them. They have more exonerations in this country than anywhere else, right? And have shown that majority of people in prison shouldn't be there in the first place. But do understand that they have criteria. They're not going to say, we wouldn't be here if you went to jury duty. So being able to be a part of the jury process and being able to part of being in the due process actually helps the community. When more community members, well, I know JoJo, I know Jay, I know him, right, can actually do that. Creating a system of participatory defense, where statements from family members, from other members, these are all done by organizers. Elaine Bartlett started participatory defense with Andrea James in DC with Cory Booker, right? I mean, these sort of defenses weren't noted. The accumulation of family members as jury was started by Shabaka Shakur. Like, so this is movements that those directly impacted have made, not organizations and bigger institutions. And yes, they do have like a $32 million budget, but they're not laser beam focused on specific political prisons, and that's a problem.
All right, thank you.
Right. Even with the parole prep project, I'm going to be honest, National Lawyers Guild, we had to create an amicus brief because of Jalil and Herman's case. And I got the paperwork from J. Edgar Hoover. He wrote a note saying, I don't care if the guns don't match, he guilty. You know what I mean? Literally. And so the evidence is there. Of course, that gun was destroyed. So the evidence is there, and it doesn't, take DNA to push that. So the innocence said was DNA is not involved, right? But we have other material evidence. Why aren't you working with innocence alone? So their innocence is strictly on genetics, and that's a very fine line. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes. Ma'am.
What's next for the film? Because it really is good.
It's showing here tomorrow night. Last time ever, and then it's going to be on
Channel 4.
Channel
Black
4.
History Month.
Black History Month. And then after that, we will continue to do national organizing while we're doing our Breaking Down the Box series.
Do you know what date in Black History Month on Channel 4?
No, but I'll give
But
you
if you
my,
sign up the email list, then
Yes,
you'll
I-
get the email
email
list on
list
that and
there.
notice of it. We'll also probably send around a link so that people can watch it as well. And we're doing classes across different universities, so if you sign up, you can get invitations for those as well. And these are going to be classes that people need to know, like COINTEL 101, like the 10-point platforming program, right? Like organizing from a community perspective, from a person who has been organizing since I was a baby, right? This is what the youth and the activists and organizers today need to hear. I want to thank our esteemed guests today. I'm honored as always to be surrounded by so many elders and so much powerful information, and I hope that y'all carry it out. I hope that even if you write a handwritten letter to your assemblyman, or to your senator, or to your legislator, and saying, why am I paying the most on the planet Earth for solitary confinement here in New York State? Buy the book, because BJ's telling me to. But also, if you do buy it, you may be able to get some signatures today in autographed copies. It is the only publication that has all rank and file members in it, and a history and personal interviews. So it's a very unique item. Yes. And I thank you all for coming. Thank you. Yes, and sign the petition, the Hope Solitary Confinement Act. There's 2 clipboards. And please sign up for the release of aging people in prison to be involved with the Elder Care Act in New York and some other endeavors that they're doing as well. So.
And there's also
Yeah.
some information
Yeah.
on 3 political prisoners, 3 Panther political prisoners.
Yes.
Over there on the table, just pick it up,
Yep.
take
Take
it
some
home,
palm
read
card,
it.
drop it in your building, share the knowledge. Yes.
You should have went first, you
I
know I
know,
can't see.
that's why I'm behind you, because they're in front of you. I saw that. DJ here, I'm good. You good? I'll get out of the train, I'm through.